We'll be starting up here in a little over a minute. Also, go ahead and open up your pods, your Q&A pod for questions, and your chat pod so we can send you things. And get ready to take polls either by logging into pollev.com or downloading the PolleV app. That's up to you. We'll give folks about 30 more seconds to finish logging in, and then we'll get started. Well, our video is not going to play today, so we're going to have to live without the video. That's odd. It was playing literally 5 minutes ago, so we'll just have to live without it. Hopefully the other one video works, but we'll make it work. My name is David Orr. I'm the director here with the Cornell Local Roads program. We're your New York State LTAP Center. We're talking today about work zones. So glad you're here on what should feel like a balmy day. It's 20 to 30 degrees warmer today, and as much as 40 or 50 degrees warmer for some of you versus the weekend. So hopefully everybody's staying warm and dealing with all the melt that we're going to get today. So that's good. We have got plenty of things going on right now. In addition to the webinar today, we've got a whole bunch more webinars coming up and an online workshop here in the month of February and into March. So we're going to be doing roadway departures, a special one on Thursday. We've got our traffic safety one next week, so it's sort of a safety focused month here. We got local federal aid next week. That's actually an online workshop on Thursday. So if you're looking at getting federal aid, there's some calls out and some money being released by the state. We'll talk about some of those things with a webinar on the 24th, a scheduled webinar, one of the foundational ones, and then we're going to be doing a special webinar on local road safety plans and an update on the funds available from the New York State Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan. So that's should be a busy month in terms of safety-related things, but then we'll finish up our foundational webinar series with snow and ice and pavement maintenance on March 3rd and 10th. And then we'll be doing our spring workshops after that. Hopefully you can sign up. We'll see you on the road with one of our workshops. And if you're wondering why well-rounded roads / complete streets isn't on the schedule, we haven't set the exact who's doing what on that, but those should be out pretty soon. The other 5 workshops, you can register for them now. Now, if you had not been on one of our webinars before, a couple of things. The audio settings are down the lower left. I see a few notes about sounding a little bit weird, so check down there in the lower left. You can also put something in the Q&A and send a question in, and either Amanda or Jody in the background will help you figure that out and figure out what might be going on sound-wise. And if you're wondering up about the webinars, the special ones, they're just like the others. They have their own listing on our website page. In fact, by magic, I'll watch, and Amanda or Jody could actually drop into the chat the link to people who want to sign up for those webinars. She'll do that. They'll do that here in a little bit. We do have you open the chat pod up and the Q&A pods. The chat is a one-way. It's not a two-way today. But we can send you the handout. We can send you information, links, things like that, including the webinar offerings that just popped into the chat pod. And if you do have a question, the Q&A pod, I may ask you to raise your hand. Okay, so this is worth 1 PDH or professional development hour for engineers here in New York State. Only the person registered gets that. Okay, if you're from another state, you need your PDHs. You'll have to check with your LTAP center to see what's available. Okay, so let's just figure out what who you are today. So, who do you work for? Town, county, city or village, state or federal, tribal, an MPO, some kind of authority like the Thruway Authority. You're a consultant, you're a contractor, or you're just working for a living. And we got a few folks working for a living today, which is cool. That's fine. Okay, got a good variety today. I like that. That's good. We got some state and federal. We've got county, town. Okay. Okay. That's one. Next question. What's your job? Are you an engineer? Are you the highway superintendent or DPW commissioner? Are you an engineer? You're just here for the PDHs. Are you a planner, a field crew, supervisor, board member? You do whatever the job is, whatever the boss tells me to do, and none of the above. And I see a few people have said whatever the boss tells me to do. Okay. So about three-quarters of you are engineers. Okay. And how long have you been there? Are you brand new and have only started last month? When we did webinars in January, we had quite a few new highway superintendents. Otherwise, give me your length. And by the way, I noticed over in the Q&A, people are putting the answers in there. You can always put an answer into the Q&A and I can, add them in if you can't see the polls for some reason on screen. I'll try to describe them to the best of my ability. And again, it's polev.com/DavidOrP. Okay. And then finally, last one that we ask just to help me out is where are you from? In this case, you get to click on the picture. Where are you from? And we'll see where we're populating from. All over New York State. You have North Country, Long Island, New York City, up along the west. Good variety again. I like it. Okay. Well, that actually helps me. I've got a couple of things I'll modify slightly based on who's here today. So let's move forward and we'll go from there. Now, before we talk about work zones, we need to talk about what signs do and maybe what they don't do. But let's talk about what signs do. Signs, as we talked about in the MUTCD webinar back last month, or was it even December, it all blurs. They communicate. They communicate regulations, they communicate warnings, they communicate all kinds of good information. So they're very important from that standpoint. But bad signs may communicate the wrong message. They communicate that we didn't want to move that stick before we put the stripe down. We got slow children on a dead-end road. Think about who's speeding on that one. And of course, the infamous, we don't know where we're going. But work zone signage, and by the way, that actually includes anything related to even the flaggers, anything we're doing communicating-wise, work zones are part of this package. So let's look at a good example here. Here's a roadway. They're redoing the sidewalks. And so there's a sign to warn the pedestrians who they don't want them into the work zone, right? Says sidewalk closed ahead, cross at the crosswalk. Now, this doesn't meet the MUTCD, but that's not really my issue. My issue is they've got one on both sides. And think about where do you want those pedestrians to walk? Do you really want them walking in the road? Because that's what they're going to do if you've closed off both sidewalks. Think about what the user sees and try to put yourself in their mind. So let's do a little quick video of one of these polls again. This is polev.com/DavidOrPE. And I'm going to have you click on the picture. If you're going up this one-lane road, they've closed off one lane to pave it. You're coming up the wrong lane in a lot of ways, but it's a work zone, so you're okay with that. Click on the picture where you think you should be driving after you get past that intersection. Do you have to turn left? Do you go up where the car is on the right? Where do you go? You should be able to click on the picture. Okay, so some of you are turning left, some of you are going up where the car is. Okay, and it's a little confusing, especially if you look carefully at the sign that's up there on the middle of the screen and it says road closed. What they were doing was trying to reuse the sign. I understand that, but think about what message you're giving to somebody. What you're supposed to do is come up around the corner to where this car is right here, okay? Over here on the right. And it's a little bit confusing in that respect. So again, Key is communication, good, clear communication. And if you think about it, what we're trying to tell the user, the driver, is what they should do. This somebody hacked one of those variable message signs and it says, "The end is near, caution, zombies ahead." It's not a good sign. Not because there might not be zombies ahead. Let's say there were. Tell the driver what they need to do. Do you want them to keep going straight? Or do you want them to turn around? If they'd said, "Turn around, zombies ahead," that'd be closer to the MUTC. Give them a clear, simple message. Okay. And by the way, I'm noticing some folks having challenge with the participation. At least if you can put in the Q&A, you're good, and we'll make that work. So don't go crazy. We're here to help you learn more than anything else. Now, who is in the work zone? So let's ask the question. I've got my list, but let's see what you come up with. Give me some people who are in a work zone. Write down, when you hear work zone users, who's a work zone user? Okay. And I'll read over here on the left the Q&A as well as the Wordle that we're creating on screen. Okay, the workers themselves are obviously part of it. Pedestrians, laborers, flaggers, operators. Okay, drivers. Okay, the public. Okay. Yeah, I see everyone in there. Police, bicyclists, everybody at some respects is going to be a user. The post office, inspectors, almost everybody. So let's look at the primary four groups we care about, and i.e. that is the traveling public, the equipment operators and crew, the supervisors, and of course the traffic control personnel, the flaggers. Now the traveling public, and we'll come back to them in a little bit more detail in just a sec. They want to get through the work zone as quickly as they can, and they'd like to do so safely. They don't want to be inconvenienced. The operators, on the other hand, the crews, they want to keep working without slowing down. But of course, that's not impossible sometimes, and we have to keep ourselves safe. Supervisors, well, they want that job done as fast and cheaply as possible. By the way, if you're wondering, this is Austin, Texas, where they were filling potholes. KFC was filling potholes, and there's the colonel out filling potholes. I don't think that's the proper compaction device, a cane, but hey. And then, of course, traffic control personnel. You want a smoothly operating work zone that's easy to manage, though maybe you got to work a little harder than what this gentleman is doing here. Okay. Now, just for the sake of helping me out, I've got my participant list, and we'll lower everybody's hands. Raise your hand if you've flagged traffic, if you've been out there flagging live traffic. I just want to get a sense of that. That helps me. Oh, quite a few of you. That's good. If you didn't raise your hand, but you're involved with designing or setting up work zones, it's not a bad idea to find a way to do that, get yourself some training, and see how it is. Flagging tends to be one of two things. It either tends to be boring, where's all the traffic, like you see in the picture, or it's just insane. And how do you even deal with it? But don't start on a big project. Start on a small one. But again, do it right. It's pretty important. The goal of this is we have to do work in the roadway. We're going to create change. People don't like change, and no one wants to be inconvenienced. Okay. But you also don't want to put people in harm's way. That's pretty important. Now, I'm at home one night, and all of a sudden there's cars coming through my neighborhood. I'm like, what is going on? Well, the local utility company had started doing some work. Got to do work. That's great. But their entire traffic control was a piece of yellow tape going across the roadway, and it was diverting cars into my neighborhood. It took me several pictures to get this. We can do better than this. Now, I did say I wanted to come back and talk a little bit about the traveling public. That includes the cars, of course. It includes buses, trucks, bicycles, pedestrians, and people who are disabled in one form or another. Okay? So let's talk about each of those just a little bit. Most of the time we think about cars. Okay? You can do simple messages maybe for cars. They're smaller, they can get around, but again, we need to communicate clearly. A little sign that's handwritten that says exit via 366, i.e. a driveway they put onto the state road while they were doing some work here at Cornell, probably we could do better than that. Okay? Yeah, not good. Buses and larger vehicles. they're going to take up more space. In this case, the road really wasn't quite wide enough for the buses to make the curve. And do you have school buses that you have to deal with? And do you maybe stop working if you know what time the school buses are coming by? Think about these issues. Of course, trucks have the same issue, especially if they've got a trailer in them or it's a semi-tractor. Again, think about temporary change and how that's going to work out with vehicles. And if you've got many bicycles or pedestrians in the area, think about them as well. Putting up the roadwork sign in the bike lane might not be your best place to put the sign. Especially in this case, there's plenty of room to put it off to the side. And of course, pedestrians, they're notorious. They will walk wherever they can walk, and they tend to ignore a lot of things if you don't make it really clear and obvious. Watch this. This is a video. Again, we'll see if the video plays. This guy crossed the street because there's a closed sidewalk on the other side. It was actually fairly well marked, and they put tape to try to help a little bit. But watch this pedestrian if my video plays. And let's see what mood it's in today. Yeah, here we go. Watch this pedestrian. He never stops moving his feet. This is not atypical. So if you've got pedestrians, think about what you might need to do differently. That's certainly an issue here at Cornell. It's an issue in urban areas near schools. And he's trying to get the guy to stop, but he never stops moving his feet. And they're putting themselves in harm's way. So keep that in mind when you're trying to set up a work zone. What do you have to deal with in terms of, well, just people behaving not the best, okay? Now, in terms of disabled, that of course includes everything from people who are in wheelchairs to just have a hard time walking, or even people who are colorblind. Think again about putting yourself in their shoes as you're setting up your work zone. It can make a huge difference, okay? So now let's start thinking about setting up a work zone. Now, what are the regulations for setting up a work zone? Well, there are 4 things I'm going to point out to you. The first one is the MUTCD. Now, the MUTCD here in New York State right now consists of the national MUTCD from December of 2023, really promulgated in January of 2024, and the New York State supplement, which actually goes back to the old national MUTCD, and New York State is working on their updated supplement. Okay, so that's the rules currently for the MUTCD. And remember, the MUTCD applies to all roads open to public travel, which may include a privately maintained roadway. Like most of the roads here at Cornell are technically a open to public travel roadway. Okay. Now here in New York State, we also do have the New York State Work Zone Traffic Control Manual, and in the handout, which is in the chat pod, if you haven't opened that chat pod up, go ahead and open it. We'll relink that handout for you. There's a link to the New York State DOT Work Zone Traffic Control Manual, which might be a useful document for you to look at. It's got some special details, and especially if you're doing a detailed work zone that's on a multi-lane roadway or an interstate, probably a pretty good thing to look at. And it's got standard sheets, the actual manual itself. I'll click on that. You can see all kinds of sections on road type, advanced signs, a lot more detail that we can cover in a 1-hour webinar. So if you're doing anything really complicated, that's something I would have you look at. Now, we do put out a work zone safety and a flagger pocket guide. These meet those standards with the caveat that they're not designed for freeways, they're not designed for really, really large roadways or high volume. They're designed for the low volume 2-lane roads that most of us deal with, a few thousand vehicles per day. And they're great starting points. But if you've got any specific details, you need to go to the MUTCD. And we'll come back to these little handouts here in a little bit. And if you need them, let us know, we can get you copies. Now, we don't even need the MUTCD to ask ourselves if something meets the standard, MUTCD compliant. So for instance, this is all that we have at this bridge closure. They're working on the bridge. It just says sharp bend. As you're coming down, it just says sharp bend. I think we can do better than that, right? So what would you do in a situation like this? Okay, and I'll go back and show the picture. The pole is active, but I'll go back up and you can see the picture to help you remember. And again, if you can't access the pole, that's okay. You can put it in the Q&A. What would you do in this particular case? Okay, let's see what you come up with. You'd put a left arrow. Drift. I like that one. If you had the right car, you could drift around the corner. Uh, should follow the MUTCD standards, have some arrows. Okay, a turn arrow. Yeah. Advanced signage probably would help. And yeah, there really wasn't any good advanced signage. Some arrow signs. Yeah, think about what you do, MUTCD or not. Okay. So as an example, I just put on top of this what I would think about. Okay. I would think about putting up some chevrons or maybe an arrow to tell people to turn and an advanced sign with a proper plaque underneath it for speed that's a temporary sharp left turn. Now, I purposely put a yellow version up there because I'm going to tell you right now, let's assume you're a small agency and you have the yellow sign in stock, but you don't have the orange sign. And we'll come back to the colors in a little bit. It's a it, work zone signs are supposed to be orange. It's a shall actually. But if that's what you've got, if you can document it, you can show and justify. I'd rather you do that than this. Do what you can with what you've got, where you are, but you absolutely need to mark it a little bit better. And by the way, it would really be nice if they're retroreflective. The signs they put up, the bridge closed was sort of retroreflective, but the sharp bend was not, and you couldn't see it at night unless your lights actually just hit it at the right angle. So you can actually see anything other than it says bridge closed. Now, that's not really what we want. Luckily, there was the flashing lights above, but they were only really blinking yellow, so they really didn't do as much as we might like. So think about that. And of course, with work zone signage, we need to have advance warning. We need to have the right color. Uh, all the same rules that apply to any signs apply to work zones. And a handmade pink paint on a white background bump sign is probably not really going to meet. Okay? So think about that. And, you know, all work zone warning signs are supposed to be black on orange. That's a shall condition for work zone signs. Okay? They are 36 inches in size minimum. Okay? And minimum of 1 foot above the ground, really for snow and ice and grass and other reasons. We want them off the ground. Okay? And by the way, I see somebody in the Q&A has said, how do you send in a good example of a bad sign? On the last slide, I have our email address, but you can also just send it to clrp@cornell.edu. And Amanda can drop that in the chat so you don't have to memorize that off the top of your head. And she's actually typing now. It's great to have Jody and Amanda back there helping out. The sign should be retroreflective. And people go, well, but I'm not working at night. Are you working early in the day and you don't get done till 4:30 in the winter? Are you working in twilight, which is one of the hardest times to see? So yeah, the sign should be retroreflective. And in terms of advance warning, it's pretty important to have that. And my biggest caveat, it drives me nuts, please remove them when they're not needed. Turn the signs over, at least, because the sign that's up at the middle of the night actually makes the rest of the signs not as effective. So keep that in mind. And remember, when you're out in the roadway, you need to have on a proper safety vest or more. In other words, it's got to have side panels. And that's true, by the way, for fire police. That's true for the police themselves when they're not actually investigating a particular crime. Everybody needs to have a vest on so we can be seen. And of course, it actually helps in the day, but it also really helps at night. Okay? And you can see the difference when your vehicle headlights hit and all of a sudden that light comes back. Now, let's do a day question for you. Ready? Here we go. How many workers can you see? We're going to be popping them up. Just a second. Okay. How many workers can you see? And then I'll answer the question in the Q&A. How many workers can you see? Throw it in the Q&A. And somebody, while you're putting those in, ask why I would not have used a detour sign and the barricade below bridge closed. Oh, absolutely. I could have used a detour sign. That's a possibility. Again, you think about the whole operation. I was looking at look, as a minimum, what can I do to at least keep people safe? But yes, a detour would probably have been preferred. In fact, when they did work on the roadway now, they've actually got a set of detour signs up. But yeah, you could do a detour sign in that bridge case back before. So people have ranges from 1 to 5 to 6. Let's bring it back up. There's the picture. And the answer, of course, is 5. Two of the people are with the State Police Accident Investigation Unit, and they weren't wearing the vest. And when asked, one of them actually said, well, we're carrying a gun. Can't see it at 55 miles an hour. Everybody should put the vest on. And in terms of the vest, you know, it really does draw your eye. So here you go. Ready to try it again? Here we go. How many people on the right? Let's see what we get this time. I'll scroll down to the bottom. And someone did make a good point in the Q&A. The height is 1 foot above the lane. If you're putting a sign in the ditch, obviously you're going to have to make it higher. 1 foot. Again, the real key is with the sign. Make sure people can see it. You can always go higher, just the minimum. Most of you did pretty good here. 6, that's good. I got a 5, but that's still pretty good. So let's look at this. First off, there's 3 things to note. 1, we only gave you 1.5 seconds to figure out and count. Okay? Now, when you're driving and distracted by those other things, that's about all the time you've got if you haven't done good signage in advance. So don't, give people plenty of time to react to things. 2, notice a lot of you who got 5 because one person wasn't wearing their vest. They hadn't put it on yet. It's under their arm. And also notice that your eyes probably went to the person wearing the lime green. We actually recommend a lot of times have the flagging crew, the traffic control personnel, wear different colors than the rest of the workers. Because then your eye will be drawn. Why is that person wearing the lime green? And it can be lost in the sea of orange. So again, something to think about. Okay. Now there are 5 parts in a typical work zone, ranging from the termination area to the advanced warning area. So let's go through these 5 areas together. Okay. The advanced warning area, typically, not always, but typically there are 3 signs in advance, especially on a higher speed roadway. Okay. So keep that in mind. Okay. The first sign in the set should be a general warning sign, like road work ahead. Okay. Utility work, things like that. Just getting people in the mode to be able to react. It actually improves their reaction time. Then you give them a specific warning. Probably the most common one we see is the 1 lane road ahead. Okay? And then finally, what do you want them to do with that information? In this particular case, again, probably the single most common set of 3 that you see, there's a flagger symbol sign. Okay? It's actually a traffic control personnel sign. We don't call them paddlers. The idea is you're telling people, look, there's a flagger in front of you who may be stopping you. They may be waving you through, but you better be prepared to stop. So you give them 3 signs, general warning, specific instructions. Okay? So it really can help out. So in our case of the 2 flagger operation, which is by far the most common, we would have the road work ahead, we'd have the 1 lane road, and then we'd have the flagger symbol. And we space those signs out, ranging from 100 to 500 feet, depending on the speed that people are traveling, whether it's urban or rural. And I'll come back to those numbers in just a little bit. There's a transition area. That's that area where you move people from the lane they're in into a closed lane or an opposing lane. It's a transition. Okay? So in this particular case, we're transitioning to get around a paving operation. Now that flagger probably should be standing in a different place because A, they don't have a really good escape route, but also they're not really helping with the transition. And you really want to have at least 5 cones blocking off the roadway to make it look like a wall of cones. Otherwise, it's easy enough to think, I can just sneak through there. So again, think about that transition. And for a lane closure like this, where you're moving people over into the opposing lane, you want 100 to 50 to 100 feet of distance. You don't need a long transition distance in that particular case. Now, the one I don't see enough, and I wish there was more of it, and again, not enough cones here, is the buffer area. There needs to be a space between where the flagger and the transition zone is and the actual work. So that if somebody does go through the cones, goes past the flagger, then you've got time for the vehicle to stop. So the question is, what is the buffer length at, well, we'll say 55 miles an hour. Well, it turns out the buffer lengths are driven by the stopping sight distance. But you don't have to memorize these things. They're in all of the standards. So let's do as an example, let's look at the lane closure on a two-lane road, and I'll blow it up so you can actually see it. Don't expect you to read it. It's way too small. But let's blow up the part that tells you for the speed limit what the buffer length is. Okay? So in this particular case, 55 miles an hour, you can see what the buffer length is. It's essentially just under 500 feet. Now, somebody asked, where is the crash truck? The New York State Department of Transportation is using attenuator vehicles in their work zones. In fact, there's a note in our work zone pocket guide that specifically mentions that. You'll notice the drawings in the work zone pocket guide do not specifically call out the crash attenuator vehicle. Okay? That's not because we don't like crash attenuator vehicles, but we know in a real world situation that may not always be possible. So if you've got high speed, if you've got high volume, we recommend you look at using a crash attenuator vehicle. And again, the state DOT is going to use them on all of their work zones. But what we're also trying to be is realistic. I will tell you right now, absolutely, you got to have a buffer space. If you're not going to have a crash attenuator vehicle, that buffer space becomes even more important. And the other thing, by the way, with crash attenuator vehicles, just want to point out, putting the crash attenuator vehicle at the wrong location can actually cause an issue. It needs to be at the beginning of the buffer, not at the end. And I've seen several that were placed in the buffer zone at the wrong end. And why is that important? Well, what's the buffer length at 55 miles an hour? Well, it's 500 feet. And the reason is you need the distance for the crash attenuator vehicle to move or for the person to stop if they go through the cones. And it's pretty important. In this case, you absolutely want one on an interstate system. Watch carefully. Now, the vehicle doesn't have its brakes on to start. That's how this works. Then they apply the brakes after the crash attenuator gets hit. And you can see they still went a couple of hundred feet. So it's pretty important to have a good buffer space. And if you're wondering, the buffer space is not optional. That's not an optional space. The only optional is the last one, which we'll get to in just a minute. So you really want that space. And by the way, the buffer is not a parking space for supervisors. That is an empty area to allow either a crash attenuator if you've got them, or at least for a vehicle to stop before it enters the work zone area. Now, in terms of the work area, really properly cone that off. We should make sure it's safe. We should make sure flaggers are standing where they belong. In this particular case, if that flagger gets trapped and steps back, the luckiest thing would be if nothing happens, but it could knock someone in the hole. They could go in the hole too. The work zone area is a pretty important one, and we'll come back to that one in a little bit. And then finally, the last one is the termination area. This is the one that's optional. Okay, you don't have to have termination signs, but obviously that's not needed if it's clear you've entered a non-work zone area. But if you're not sure, you can always put up a sign that says roadwork ends. That's perfectly fine and perfectly acceptable. Okay, so keep those things in mind. And by the way, if you're wondering, yes, this was an actual sign for many, many decades ago. A contractor put them up, but they made them get rid of them. Now, what are the spacing of the advanced signs? Let's go back and look at that. And that is in an urban area, it's about 100 to 350 feet, depending on the speeds, and 500 feet in a rural area. If you are from outside of New York State, the distances may be different. New York State has its own distances. I actually like the fact New York State has some slightly smaller distances for low speed, 30-mile or less roadways. Okay? But keep that in mind. You need to check your own state's regulations if you're working outside of New York State, but it depends on the speed. And again, technically, whether it's urban or rural, the key is to give people time to react. Okay? Now, so we need to make sure that everything's set up. The most dangerous time for putting in a work zone is when you're setting it up. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about placement and removal. Okay? Don't mislead the public. So the first thing you're going to put up are your advanced signs. So you're going to put up a road work ahead sign. You're then going to put up your one lane road ahead sign and then your flagger symbol sign. You're going to put those signs up and you can put a fourth sign if you want to. Okay? Now, what goes next? What goes next? Now, I've got a note in here in the Q&A while I'm listening. I want to have you guys throw the answer in the Q&A and what goes next after the flagger symbol sign. Our old friend Al Bachner, who's one of our circuit writers, does point out the fact that you do need a buffer space in front of a crash attenuator vehicle if you're using them. So your buffer space gets even longer. But that means you have to have the space for the crash attenuator vehicle to move forward, as well as the buffer space for the work. So again, if you're using them, there are standards. That's why I wanted you to go to the New York State DOT work zone guide because it talks about those spacings and all that. And do you have that spacing? Okay, so let's see what we've got listed here in our what goes next. I've got cones. I've got the sign for the end. I've got a flag tree. I've got a taper. I've got the distance to the work zone, cones and barrels. Ah, there it is. There's the one I'm looking for. The next person, or next item that goes in is the flagger themselves. You should put a flagger up before you put any cones in the roadway. Get the flaggers in position, whether it's a one or two person operation. Because the minute you start putting something into the roadway, you need to control things. So then you put your cones in, then you bring your equipment in, then you do your work. The flaggers should be in position to control traffic before you actually close anything off. And to take things down, don't take that flagger out and still have the cones up because what do people need to do? So remember that. The order should actually be the cones come next, not the flagger. Okay? So the cones would come down, the flagger would actually be the next to last person, and then you remove your signs in the exact opposite order you put them up. Because it's the single most dangerous time. If you haven't seen this video, it was on the web from last year. You can see this gentleman here who comes really close to having a really bad day as opposed to just a day. Okay? Ready? Here we go. Now his helmet came off, but he picked it right back up. He picked his hard hat up. And that's why, by the way, in some work zones, they're actually putting helmets with the straps to keep them on. But luckily, no serious injuries here. Again, putting up a work zone is one of the most dangerous times. So keep that in mind as you're moving forward. Okay? Now, again, I'm going to say this again because it drives me nuts. Hide, cover, or turn away your work zone signs when they are not needed. Okay? Hide them. Don't show them. It drives me nuts when I see them up in the middle of the night. And if you're working around a corner, all the same signs come into play. But again, think about sight distance. Think about where you're going to put the flagger. You know, if you just use the standard distances, but you put the flagger on the wrong side of the corner, can they be seen? You know, all of our pocket guides and our work zone drawings all show nice, perfectly straight roads, but they're not. So think about hills and curves and stuff like that. Okay? And in an hour, we just can't go through a lot of details. Now, let's talk a little bit about flaggers. We don't have a lot of time to talk about flaggers, but they are one of the most important parts of a good work zone. They should not be the person who's the last person on the job and never does things quite right. No, you actually want your best people being flaggers. They're protecting you. So what are the qualifications for a good flagger? If you could throw into the poll, what do you think are qualifications for a good flagger? Attentive, alert, sober. They have some endurance. Yeah. They pay attention. Yep. They should be trained. Hmm. Not on the phone. Yeah. They like the idea. Somebody put in a note about putting a couple of cones next to the flagger station to highlight where they're standing. I always like that idea to move the cones around with you. Yep. So all kinds of things. We know what good flaggers should do, but a lot of times we don't necessarily practice what we think about. To me, a good flagger must be alert, watching traffic. It's like security people at a sporting event who have to watch the crowd and not watch the event. Flaggers need to be watching the traffic. They need to be in a place where they can be seen. They need to be visible. Okay? They really should be the people who have a little bit of motivation, that really want to do the job to some extent. Okay? You need to make sure they're trained to do the job. Okay? Now, of course, what that means is they're going to have to stand alone. They're going to have to be facing traffic. And they really should never stand in the travel lane. Okay? So keep those things in mind. And by the way, don't leave them out there forever. If you're a supervisor, you should know how to flag traffic as well. Give those people a break. It can make a huge difference. Now, I've got a note that says here, at night, have you ever seen the helmets with the lights? I've seen some hard hats with the lights on them to help people see at night. I haven't seen the helmets with the straps at nights, but I know they exist. I just personally haven't seen them. I've only seen the hard hats with the lights at night. But notice this flagger right here. Um, that's 3 strikes and you're out. And I know, oh, but it's just a quick job. We're just doing some utility work. The flagger's not paying attention. They're not wearing the proper vest with the side panels. They're using a flag, which is supposed to be for emergencies only rather than a paddle. And the worst of all, they're standing in the lane. We don't want to be in the lane. If we get struck by a car, chances of walking away go down pretty quick based on speed. So again, do me a favor and get the flaggers where they belong. Think about what would happen if the driver didn't see the flagger. You want them to go by and blow their whistle and say, hey, somebody's coming in the work zone. So keep that in mind. The flagger's equipment includes the paddle, not the flag. The flag's an emergency device. The vest, a hard hat, okay? In this case, to help them be seen. And then this is an important one, and that's suitable attire for the weather. If you had to be working last Saturday, it's going to be very different attire than if you're working in July and it's 85 degrees, okay? Obviously, they're going to want to have really, really good boots. They're going to really want to have, you know, the proper long pants so they can be out there all day, maybe some sunscreen, proper attire. You're going to have a whistle or a horn to alert the drivers, alert the workers that there's somebody coming in. Somebody notes a radio. Not everybody's going to have a radio. If you've got them, that's great. But again, as a minimum, some way to alert the workers. An idiot just went by me and they're entering the work zone. Okay? We like P-less whistles because they work in any weather. And people tend to want to blow those silly air horns, but something. And then I actually am a big fan of the idea that the flagger is responsible to flagger ahead sign. So if you're going to be taking a break and you're going to open the lane up while you're taking lunch break or something like that, the flagger just walks down to the sign, turns it 90 degrees while you're working. You could leave up the works on ahead signs, but you turn that flagger symbol and it essentially tells the driving public, oh, the signs are turned. There may be work here later, but we're done right now. We're taking a break. So give that responsibility to somebody. And again, it could be the flagger who just goes down and turns it, especially in a 2-flagger operation. So what I want to do in our last quarter hour, we got a little more than a quarter hour, but last quarter hour, I want to prepare a traffic control plan. Okay? I want to make sure we're in good shape. We can use the Work Zones Safety Pocket Guide to do this. So, if you need copies, let us know. We can help you get those. If you're looking at this, absolutely it's important to read the notes. And by the way, not just the notes on the page you're going to use, we'll talk about that in a minute, but the whole document. It actually talks about the attenuated vehicles towards the front. It talks about the size of cones and things, number of cones you put in a buffer and things like that. But make sure you read the notes. So as an example, this is the 2-flagger operation. And you can see it talks about the fact that if it's a short work zone of less than 60 minutes, you might be able to get away with 2 signs. Okay? But it also says that you might, in a place where it's a lot of traffic, use 4 signs. On an interstate, that's actually recommended and shall in some cases. Okay? So again, some notes. Make sure you read those notes, because there's differences that come into play. So let's just look at the 1 and 2-flagger operations and the notes in the 1-flagger operation. And I'm going to put this one on nice and read it to you just because it's pretty important. A single flagger may be adequate for low volume situations with short work zones on straight roadways. Where 1 flagger is used, the flagger must be positioned to be visible to approaching traffic from both directions. Okay? I'll come back to that idea in just a second, but I just want you to tell me when you read that, you say low volume, put in here, what do you think is low volume? The answers aren't going to show up. I want you to type them in and I'll show the answers. I'm going to read the one question in the Q&A while you're putting your answers in. And somebody is noting the fact that they want to know if there's ever been an issue with a flag shown in the sign and the person down the road is holding a paddle sign instead of a flag. That was the one with the flagger in the roadway. They were holding a paddle at the other end. They had a paddle at the other end and a flagger. The liability of that is just off the charts. You really want to have everybody coordinating with each other. Okay? So we've got people putting in the Q&A, and let me go see what you guys did for responses. And the responses are less than, I got 400, I've got 1,000, I've got a 500, I've got 50, I've got side roads. Over in the Q&A, I've got that one car every few minutes, less than 200 vehicles. It's not super well defined, okay? Now, the AASHTO low volume book talks about 2,000 vehicles a day, and they define very low volume as 400 vehicles a day, which is about one vehicle a minute when people are going to work. But here's another way to think about this. Okay? Now, it's a little riskier on high speed roadways too. So I get a little even nervous on a 55-mile-an-hour roadway. I like low speed as well. Okay? Even though it says 2-lane low volume. Okay? Think about this. Ask yourself this question, trying to decide between these two. Can the flagger walk between the work and buffer areas between vehicles approaching the site? Okay? Because in the case of a single flagger, they shouldn't be just standing in one spot the whole time across from the work. They actually should walk to one end or the other to help move the traffic. So if they need to walk from one end of the work zone back down, they have to go past the whole buffer to get to where the taper is. Walk back and forth. So they're really walking. And again, my pen has decided today of all days to give up the ghost. Yep, it's still not working. So we're going to do this the old-fashioned way. And I got to pick a color other than white because you're not going to see white. I can tell you that. Let's do purple. They need to be able to walk from this end as a minimum to this end, including the buffer. Maybe even a little further past the transition would be even better. But as a minimum, they got to walk that. If they can't do that between vehicles showing up, you've got too much traffic. So you've got a really long work zone, you need 2 flaggers. If you've got a lot of volume of traffic, you need 2 flaggers. If it's high speed and not a lot of time to be able to see in both directions, you need 2 flaggers. So answer yourself that question, and it might be able to help figure that out. So in terms of doing a traffic control plan, it's specific to your work zone. It gives advance notice, allows for errors and inattention, and moves traffic away from the hazards. And more importantly, it moves traffic away from the workers. So what do I need to have in my traffic control plan? So put in here, what do I need to have in my traffic control plan? What's the minimum? And I'll show you my list. We'll give you about 20, 30 seconds. Yeah, it's what signs you're going to use, the personnel, the date, the time. I'm looking for 2 things, which I hope to see here, and then we'll move on. All kinds of answers. Signs, flaggers, cones. Ah, there it is, the weather. The weather is actually one of those things we don't always think about, but it's absolutely critical. So you want the starting and ending time, location, any devices, personnel equipment. If you change a regulatory device, you want to include that as well. And then again, you absolutely want the weather, okay? I actually like to make traffic control plans by taking that work zone pocket guide, go down to a copier, find the one sheet I want to use, put it on the copier, hit copy. I've now got my work zone traffic control plan 3/4 of the way done, and then I just draw on it the additional stuff. The date. I haven't added the weather yet because I'm doing this in the office. When I get out there, I'm going to finish writing it up with including the weather information, what time we actually started and ended, and that becomes a perfectly fine record. And someone asks, do we recommend radios? Well, I'd love to see radios, but I know there's an economics involved. So again, always do what you can with what you've got, where you are. think about the public. Okay, so now let's do our Q&A time. So our last 10 minutes together, let's do our questions and answers to make everybody happy. Okay, so we got 10 minutes. We're in good shape. So I've got a situation. This is our one with the flagger who probably should have been standing across the road. Well, no, they should have been standing across the road, and there should have been some cones. No one's going to argue about that. But let me ask you, at this situation, if there's 1,000 vehicles per day and a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, this site has a different value. I know that. I'm just telling you, if you had those numbers, which of these three scenarios would you think about using? Would you use self-regulating? Would you use a one flagger operation or two flagger? And again, it's a small site with a low speed limit, so a short buffer of only 150 feet. So total length is 200-foot work zone. Okay? And again, I'll let you choose. I'm going to do a poll, and I see some people are throwing them in to the Q&A. Okay? And so some people using single flagger, some people using two flagger. I've got a lot of one flaggers coming in over in the Q&A. Even I've got a self-regulating. Again, this is why I want you to think about what scenario you might want to deal with. Can you really flag that traffic? Okay, if you can, great, go for it. If you don't feel you can, then you want to be absolutely thinking about the two flagger. I know it's more people, but think about what's going to keep people safe. We all want to get home every single day. Self-regulating, you got to be able to have really low traffic. People need to be able to see around the work zone and get around safely. Low speed, obviously. Okay. One flagger, in this particular scenario, there was over 3,000 vehicles a day and well above 1,000. So it really needs two flaggers. But 1,000, there are places where 1,000 might be okay. But you're going to have to think about it. Can you walk back and forth before the next cars get there? If you can't, you need to think about two flagger. That can really make a big difference. Okay. So again, something to think about. And of course, there may be times when you do something else. Heck, you may even just close the roadway off and do a detour around, depending on the work, if you can do a reasonable detour. So let me ask you this, and the rest of these, by the way, I'm gonna wait till it gets cleared. Magic hands. The Q&A is gonna get clear. We're gonna do the rest of these with the Q&A. Just save a little time. I don't need everybody to answer, but I want you to just answer yourself. You should have heard all these things. Why is this not a good sign? What is wrong with this variable message sign saying the end is near, caution, zombies ahead? And let's assume they're actual zombies, just for the sake of argument. Exactly. Very good. It doesn't give instructions. It doesn't give us directions. If there's zombies ahead, what do you want the driver to do? Do you want them to keep going and say hello to the zombies? Do you want them to turn left, turn right, turn around, slow down? Give people specific instructions. And the clearer, easier instructions you give them, the more likely they're going to obey it. Keep it simple. Okay? Now, let's try this one. Should work zone signs be retroreflective? In this case, we won't even do the Q&A. You can put it in there. You can raise your hand. I don't care which way you want to do it. Is that a yes? Yeah, raise your hand. Say yes, either one. Yeah, absolutely, they should be retroreflective. We think, I'm not working at night, but here in New York State, it can get dark at 4:30 with a cloudy day. You really want that retroreflective, and truth be told, you need it even during the day. It can help. Okay, so yes, absolutely, we want work zone signs to be retroreflective. Where should that flagger be standing? Let's see what you think. Q&A. Yeah, he should be standing on the shoulder. Yeah, not towards the center. Again, think about if the driver coming down the road didn't see the flagger for any reason, distracted driving on their cell phone, whatever. Heck, maybe they're reading their work zone pocket guide. Shouldn't be doing that while driving, but maybe they are. Um, you want that flagger standing in a place where they won't get struck. At 40 miles an hour, if they get struck, the chances of being killed is 50-50. The chances of walking away without a serious injury, pretty slim. Okay? So Make sure they're standing out wearing the proper vest. Someone pointed that out. Okay. This particular flagger never turned around until I was about 40 feet from him. I kept creeping up and taking his picture. And then he told me I was number one. Well, he showed me a finger. I'm pretty sure he said I was number one. The idea is if you're flagging traffic or you have people flagging traffic, you want them to be standing where they're safe. What's the proper color for work zone signs? It's a shall, but I do know that a lot of people, um, yeah, it should be orange with black lettering. There are a couple of exceptions. The regulatory signs are still going to stay there black and white. The railroad crossing symbol sign is always yellow and black. Um, do what you can with what you've got. You know, if you've got yellow and black and that's all you've got, I'd rather you do that than this. This is just not good. But most important thing of all, document what you do and why you do it. Because if you don't document it, somebody else might. Who should be wearing a high-vis clothing in a work zone? Yeah, everybody. Okay, if you're not engaged in actual, police activities, maybe the police won't need it while they're doing police activities or the fire people. You certainly don't want that. But everybody should be wearing high visibility. It actually gives you respect. It gives you rapport, and people go, "Oh, okay." They pay attention. Um, what do you think when you see this gentleman? You're going, uh, I'm not sure I know what to do here. I'm not, it makes me feel bad. Okay? Yeah, I know it's a hot day, but it really isn't helping in a lot of ways. And they really should have a hard hat on as well. It's a minimum a hat that's bright and colorful, but I like a hard hat. What's the minimum height of the signs? And remember, this is the height compared to the roadway. So if you're in a ditch, it's got to be higher than, it's not 1 foot off the ground. 7 feet, 1 feet. Permanent signage would be 7 feet in an urban area, 5 feet in a rural area. If you're doing a long-term work zone with permanent signage, yeah, you'd want the higher 1 foot in every case. Okay. Again, not only respect, but if there was snow, if the grass grew up, you want some height. You want to be able to see the signs. Put the signs where they can be seen. Okay? That's the most important thing. In fact, when you're done, we actually recommend when you get the work zone done, drive through it. Or better yet, have somebody drive through it who hasn't set up the work zone and see if they get lost. Now, what are the 5 parts of a work zone? I'll watch the Q&A, and when I see all 5 parts, we'll move on. What are the 5 parts to a good work zone? Let's see if you guys come up with the 5 parts. Advanced signing area, the buffer area, which we never put enough of, the transition area, good, okay. Termination, which is the one optional. Okay, we're looking for one more. Oh, there's somebody put them all in at once. So we got it finally. Yeah, the work area. It's pretty important. You got to do work. You got to have a work area. Okay. These are the important parts of a work zone. And the single most important part, in my mind, if I had to pick one that I don't see enough, is the buffer. The termination is the one optional. Okay. You want a good work zone. But also think about the places that aren't these 5 areas. The other lane. Think about how vehicles are going to interact with that. And then why are work zones important? Why are work zones important? Put in there, why do you think we're safety? Yeah. Safety, protect lives. hmm And to get work done. We do want to get work done. I mean, a good work zone actually makes you more productive. We've done some research on major roads. And I can tell you right now, if I've got a good work zone crew, I can get the job done faster, more efficiently, and I actually get better quality. But yeah, the number one item what you're putting there is safety. This is a picture of my mother, my grandmother, and an airplane my grandpapa built many, many years ago, of course. But we want everybody to get home safely every single day. And work zones change things. People are so used to driving a particular route. We put a work zone in, we're changing those habits. So we need to sign it so they don't get themselves in trouble. Okay? Um, we've been arguing about whether that's a DC-3 or a Lockheed Electra. It's got components of both if you look carefully. The front is a DC-3, but the back looks more like a Lockheed. So We were arguing about that, but he did it from by himself. So I was always impressed when I found this picture. So with that, I do have time for a couple of quick questions. If you've got any questions, you can throw them in the Q&A. Just as a reminder, the rest of our month, which seems to be focused on safety, we're going to be doing a roadway departure special webinar on Thursday. We've got traffic safety in general coming up next week. We've got local federal aid following Thursday, so actual 3.5 hour, 4 hour online workshop. We're going to be doing specific of grants uh, on the 24th, local road safety plans and the safety funds available from New York State DOT on the 26th. And then we're finishing up our webinars and then getting into our spring workshops. With that, I will see if there's any last questions. A question that's actually an important question. Again, we've only got an hour, but it's a good one. I've seen a flagger that starts behind the white stripe until the first car stops and he moves out in the lane. Is that okay? I actually like to wait till the second car stops. And the only reason you should be going out in the lane is to talk to the driver to let him know what you're going to do. Because if you think about that flag, the paddle, and you walk out, the people expect the sign to be over on the right. So you want to think about where people can see that sign. But if you need to walk out, you can. But a lot of modern cars have windows that are electronic, you know, remote. You can roll the passenger window down. Try that first. Try walking down, see if they roll the window down. You can talk to them and say, hey, it's going to be a couple of minutes. They're doing utility work. They're doing some patching. Just let people know. It can actually calm them down quite a bit. Just talk to them about it. But sometimes it's best just to be silent. Do what you need to do to be safe. With that, everybody have a great day. Stay warm. Get outside. It's a nice balmy day. Get your flip-flops on. Everybody take care. We'll see you on Thursday for our next webinar. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.